Hey everyone, it was round 7 of the candidates tournament today, and we're halfway through the tournament after this game, and at the moment Jan Nepomniachtchi is currently winning it with Maxime Vachier-Lagrave on his tail. And these two players actually met today, with Maxime playing the white pieces and Jan Nepomniachtchi playing with the black pieces. And ironically we get into a French defence, and it goes e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, and Nepomniachtchi played bishop to b4 with MVL playing e5, and then there was a c5 and a3. A typical structure we see in the French, and black obviously takes this knight off, doubles white's pawns and plays knight to e7. Now typically here a lot of white players play queen g4 attacking g6, and the main line goes castles, bishop d3 and knight c6. White can play queen h5 to threaten mate on h7, but then black can play knight g6, but white follows in with knight to f3, and after queen c7, knight g5, again threatening mate, h6, there's a nice little tactic with knight takes f7, queen takes g6, a trade of queens, takes on d4, and then knight takes d4. And this is sort of one of the main lines in this sort of variation that white could have got in for with queen g4. So in this variation both sides actually have equal material, so it's a very interesting game. So in this game, instead of queen g4, MVL played h4 instead, maybe preparing to play g4 and h5. I play this sort of way in the wing gambit quite a lot. It's good to just launch your h-pawn up. It really stops black playing moves like knight g6. So queen c7 was played in the game, MVL played h5, covering this g6 square, and Nepo played h6, covering this g5 square and just stopping this h-pawn from crawling up the board even more. Maxime played rook to b1, just gaining the open file for his rook. In the game Nepo played b6 now, but if black takes on d4, c takes d4, queen c3 can be played with check, and after queen d2 takes, it's actually still quite even, so black definitely could have taken the pawn if they wished, but Nepo just made it more solid with b6, and now MVL does play queen g4. So okay, now the queen's attacking this g7 pawn, Nepo defends with the rook. And obviously there's no tricks here with bishop takes h6 because this knight on e7 defends the rook perfectly. So instead MVL just played bishop b5 with check. If black blocks this with their own bishop, which probably makes some sense trying to trade the bishops off, white should definitely retreat their bishop back and threaten bishop h7 ideas. If king f8, white can continue with knight to f3, and if c4 just played bishop to e2. But at the end of this it's quite interesting because black has moves like bishop a4 and white can defend with bishop d1. The computer gives this as equal, which I think is fair enough because both sides have their problems. For instance, this rook is stuck on g8, but look at white's bishops on c1 here, it's just terrible. So again, it's not very easy for either side actually in this variation. Okay, so but after bishop b5, Nepo just played king f8, sidesteps it. Black can't castle anyway, so this makes a lot of sense. MVL retreats his bishop back, and Nepo tries to trade his white squared bishop for white's brilliant bishop on d3. And there's not a whole lot white can do to avoid it, to be honest. In the game MVL just took on c5. If black recaptured, again it's quite an equal game after takes, knight to f3, rook b8, takes, castles, and then just queen a5 for black with bishop e3. Maybe actually it's black who's got the slight edge in this variation because maybe black can play queen takes a3, maybe c4 for white, d4, and then just bishop d2. Knight gets back into the game, and maybe white can go queen e4. So Stockfish gives this as quite equal, but obviously black's a pawn up now and has a passed a pawn. But they've still got some structure problems with trying to get this rook out on g8. So yeah, black could take on c5 if they wished. But Nepo took on d3, bishop takes d3, MVL recaptured with that c-pawn, and Nepo continued with knight to d7, so attacking the c5 pawn. And white can't take on b6 because if c takes b6, queen c3 is just devastating, so white is forced to protect their e5 pawn, and MVL does this by playing d4. Nepo captured on c5, and now prepares moves like queen to a5, start harassing these dark squared pawns. So to stop this, basically the job's been done for this queen on g4, so MVL retreats it back to d1, preparing to play queen to a4. So to stop this, black has to play queen a5 now, and prepares to play c takes d4 because his c pawn is pinned, and it also is a good move which stops white's queen getting into the game. So to stop c takes d4, bishop d2 was played, and the point is if c takes d4 now, white can just play c takes d4. Black could try and take this pawn off with queen takes a3, but maybe bishop b4 is just too much for black. So it looks as though white's sacked a pawn because after queen a6, knight to e2. Who's winning this game? White's a pawn down but has an excellent bishop, and I think I'd prefer to play white because white's plan is much more simple. Just going to castle kingside and then probably get the rooks on the A and B file. So that's quite simple. After bishop d2, maybe black could take this pawn straight away with queen takes a3, but I think white can play knight to e2, protecting their two pawns. If the queen goes back to safety, white can again just castle, and if rook b8, play rook a1, attacking the queen. And if the queen goes to b6, there's moves like queen a4 that can come, attacking the knight and that pawn. Knight c6 protects the pawn and the knight, but then just comes rook fb1. An interesting variation, and now queen takes is given as the best move, with takes, so giving up the queen for two rooks and king h2. But again, white's still in this game, attacking this knight. That protects the knight, and the pawn is still protected on a7, but then bishop c1. And I think we've got an interesting game on our hands if they went in for this variation, because moves like bishop a3 are coming up. And yeah, it's a very feisty game. So white's got the queen for the two rooks, but white will have a great bishop on a3 at some point. So okay, after bishop d2, I think Nepo was being rather cautious. He didn't take on a3 or play c takes d4. He actually played rook to b8, so just gains the open file, contesting it against this rook on b1. And now knight to e2 for MVL. If black goes for the trade of rooks, then queen takes. Maybe queen takes a3 here. But I think white has queen to b7, and attacking this knight, if it jumps in to b6, d takes c5, queen takes c5, queen takes a7. Equal position once again, but it looks as though this bishop might get out to e3, and that's a big threat against the knight on b6. If we just go back after this trade of rooks as well, maybe black can just play queen to a6. I think white can play a4, and if queen takes a4 now, white should just castle. If c4, again we've got this queen b7 idea, knight b6, and then f4 for white. And I've put here it's equal but a very interesting game because both sides are going at it. White's going to attack on this side of the board. I reckon they can play g4 at some point as well. I think the king's perfectly safe on g1. And black's also got this passed a pawn. So it just depends who could come out on top in this position. So okay, Nepo didn't take on b1, instead he just played c4, locked down the position. And now MVL plays really well. So he castles first, rook b6 is played, black's preparing to try and maybe double rooks, queen c2, so connecting their two rooks together, which is fair enough for MVL. And again, if black takes on a3 here, I think now actually white's in a better position. They can play bishop c1, hitting the queen. If queen a5, rook takes b6, knight takes b6, and then play bishop b2, preparing to play rook a1. If black tries to trade queens, obviously white will ignore this. If the queen goes backwards, now play rook a1. And I put this in the analysis, and for some reason the computer says rook h8. And then queen c2, king g8, and bishop to a3. And again, black is actually a pawn up here, but white's got a supreme bishop on a3. And I think we'd all give up the pawn for this brilliant bishop. It's going to be very hard for black to defend this. I think the bishop might jump in to c5, and then there's ideas like queen to a2. I prefer to play white in this variation anyway. Let me know what you think in the comments. But anyway, after queen c2, rook h8 was played. So maybe stopping any queen h7 ideas. Potentially going to move the king to g8. And maybe the rook also supports this h6 pawn, so avoid any like sacrifices from the bishop on d2. a4 was played next by MVL, so gaining more space for the bishop. So basically white's plan is just to play bishop c1 and bishop to a3 and get this brilliant bishop, because then he'll have an amazing pawn chain to really help it. Again, this is very similar structure now to the wing gambit. So king e8 was played, getting off that diagonal straight away, and now rook to b4. The point of this move is I think if black takes this off, then c takes b4 is devastating. Two pawns are connected, attacking the queen. If the queen retreats, there's a5, again hitting the queen. If queen c6, they can play rook b1, preparing to play b5. And if you try and block, then just play knight c3. And if queen b8, play b5. And these two pawns are just rolling down the board with the support of these four pieces behind white. So okay, we can't take it. So for this reason, Nepo now plays knight c6, attacking the rook again. But MVL plays an amazing move, I'll be honest. f4 now, just ignores the threat. So why did they ignore this? Well, if knight takes b4, then c takes b4 again. Black can obviously try and give back the rook, or the exchange rather, but I think still white would come out on top. If they try and keep it with queen to a6, white can play b5. If queen b7, play bishop b4. And again, we've got this amazing bishop that's just dominating the board with the support of these pawns. If a6, to get rid of these pesky pawns, then white should go for f5. The point is, after a takes b5, white's now attacking on the other side of the board with f takes e6, rook takes e6, queen f5, threatening to take on f7. If knight to f8 to protect the pawn, just play a takes b5. And if rook b6, then play knight c3, protecting their b5 pawn. And white's got a really good game, just because the rook's actually camped in the corner, and all of white's pieces are really active. They've even probably maybe got e6 ideas coming, or just maybe even bishop takes the knight at some point, or just bishop c5 actually. Looks really good. So okay, black didn't take on b4. Nepo played knight to e7 though instead. Maybe going to reroute their knight to f5, who knows. Rook fb1 though by MVL, and now they've got double rooks on the b file, and it's looking quite scary for black. So first Nepo blocks the position on the king side, so at least he stopped the attack for white on that side of the board. But MVL just continues, rook b5 hits the queen. Again, if rook takes b5 here, there's rook takes b5, queen a6, and then play bishop c1. After a few moves, bishop to a3 again is on the cards. If queen takes a4, then just queen takes a4, knight takes, and rook b8 wins the rook, so we can't play this. And if rook f8 instead, there's bishop b4, queen takes a4, takes, bishop takes knight, king takes, and rook b7 at the end of it, with king e8 and rook takes a7 hitting the knight. If the knight jumps back, there's rook takes g7, and white's got a better position. They're a pawn up with a supreme rook on the 7th rank. So after rook b5, Nepo played queen a6 to hide their queen, but now I think MVL is just in the driving seat. He played bishop c1, preparing to go bishop a3. King f7 was played, and now bishop to a3. And yes, I've highlighted a lot of material there, but basically white's got a supreme pawn structure in the centre. The bishop can jump into c5, which I've put a nice little arrow and a little square there for you. And also maybe white could even threaten to take the rook on b6 or take the knight on e7. White's got a very nice position. So bishop c5 though is the major threat for white here. The point is, if bishop c5 comes and black tries to take it with the knight, then the pawn can take, and this will be devastating for black. If rook c6 though, to maybe try and get off the b file and stopping the trade, then rook b7 hitting the knight. If rook d8, white's got the amazing move g4. If f takes g4 in this position, there's a nice tactic with takes, we can play queen h7, and if king f7 to protect that pawn, there's f5. And if e takes f5, play knight to f4, and white's preparing to play moves like e6, and this knight on d7 is still pinned, and the queen's also converging as well to take g7 if the king moves away. Back to the game then. Instead of rook c6, I think Nepo's only choice was to double rooks, but now MVL finds the winning formula. He takes on e7, the king recaptures, and now he plays g4, cracking open black's position. Threatening to play g takes f5, followed by queen takes f5. Jan played rook takes b5, the pawn took it, rook takes b5, and now MVL took on f5, g takes f5. So I think if e takes f5, then white will just play queen takes f5 and has a very nice position with a passed e pawn coming up the board. So in the game, Nepo actually tried to try and make a draw. Rook takes b1 makes a lot of sense. Queen takes b1, e takes f5. But actually, instead of taking with the queen, I mean, queen takes f5 is possible, but maybe queen e6 is quite interesting for both sides. If queen b1 is queen g4, king f2, queen takes pawn, queen b4 check, king e8 and queen d6. Again, so I think white still gets into a winning position because they're now threatening to play queen takes d5 or play e6. So queen takes f5 is possible. However, MVL played it very nicely. Knight g3 first, preparing to take the pawn with the knight. Queen b6 was played. MVL took on f5 with check. There was a king f8 and queen a1. So maybe preparing to play queen to a3 with check. Queen e6 was played attacking the knight. And MVL played this very well, I have to say. Knight g3 just protects the pawn on h5 and really limits this queen, so it can't jump into f5. Nepo played it to queen g4 though, but then just king g2. And the reason why this knight is so good, it also protects this e2 square. And black's got no checks against the white king. Okay, so queen takes f4 was played. MVL took their pawn back. Queen takes h7. Attacking the knight on d7. Nepo protected his knight, but then just a queen to a3 by MVL. King d8 and then queen to d6. Threatened to take on d5. And here I think Nepo realised he's just in a completely lost position. There's nothing really he can do. For instance, let's say king e8 here. Then queen e6, king d8, queen takes d5, queen d2 and king h3. White's threatening to play e6. There's not a lot black can do to stop this. In the game though, he went for a wild g5. MVL just calmly took this off. After h5, there was g7, and finally Nepo resigned the game here because white's just simply winning the game. Going to get a queen, or could even play queen takes d5 followed by e6 ideas. It's very easy for white to win this endgame. But I have to say this was a very straightforward game for MVL, and he played it very nicely. He just used the power of the bishop on a3 just to win the position and had a very nice structure. And I think, as some commentators were saying, this is why many top grandmasters don't play the French. At the top level it's just simply maybe a bit weakening for black's position. But certainly I think if you're under 2700 the French defence is the perfect opening to play. It's just at this very high level it seems as though white does gain an advantage. But anyway, thank you for watching my analysis. Hopefully I'll bring you another video tomorrow. Stay safe everyone, and I'll see you soon.